Welcome to Bullion Signal. If you've been anywhere near the financial corners of the internet lately, you've probably heard the explosive rumor. Mexico is banning all silver exports. Some are calling it a hoax. Others are calling it the supply shock of a lifetime. The truth, as is often the case, is something far more complex and, frankly, far more alarming than a simple government decree. What we're seeing, according to the source material we're breaking down today, isn't an outright ban. It's something that could be much worse, a silent, creeping nationalization of the world's most important silver supply.
So let's tackle the big question head on. Is Mexico, the undisputed king of silver production, actually shutting off the tap to the rest of the world? Well, the simple answer is no. There's no official press release, no new law on the books, no soldiers standing at the ports turning away cargo ships. But that's the wrong question to be asking. The real story isn't about a loud official ban, it's about a quiet, two-front war being waged against silver production that is achieving the exact same result. Less and less physical silver is actually making it out of Mexico and onto the global market.
And this really gets to the heart of it. The myth, the online rumor, is about a formal top-down export ban. The reality is what some are calling a soft ban. It's a pincer movement. On one side, you have restrictive government policies slowly starving the industry of its future. And on the other side, you have organized crime bleeding the industry of its present-day production. Together, they're creating a de facto export ban, whether it's officially declared or not. Let's start by looking at that first prong, the government's official policy. Now, this part of the squeeze is subtle, but it is incredibly powerful. It isn't about stopping the trucks that are leaving the mines today. It's about ensuring that 10 years from now, there are far fewer trucks leaving, or perhaps none at all. The Mexican government has put in place a policy framework that is systematically designed to suffocate the long-term viability of silver mining in the country. It's a slow-motion strangulation of the very source of the supply. This is the key. This single statement, coming directly from the nation's president, is the linchpin of the entire government strategy. This isn't some bureaucratic memo. It's a clear and direct declaration of war on the future of the mining industry. But to really grasp the devastating impact of this policy, you first need to understand what a mining concession actually is. Think of a mining concession as a mine's lifeline. It's the right to explore and, if you're lucky, develop a new ore body. Mines are not infinite. They are depleting assets. Once a company has extracted all the economic silver from a piece of land, that mine is finished. The only way for the company and the industry to survive is to constantly be exploring and developing new sites to replace the ones that are running out. By declaring a full stop on all new concessions, the government has essentially put an expiration date on every single silver mine in Mexico. They've told the entire industry it's no longer allowed to plan for a future. And if you think this is some far-off, theoretical problem for 10 or 20 years down the road, think again. The chilling effect is immediate and it is brutal. A drop of 9.2% in national production in a single month? That's not a dip, that's a collapse. In the world of global commodities, a number like that is a 5-alarm fire. It shows that the uncertainty and the hostile environment created by these policies are already forcing companies to scale back, to halt projects, and to produce less silver right now, today. And this is what the future looks like. This isn't a forecast, it's a schedule. These are major mines, significant contributors to the global supply that are already slated for closure over the next few years. And here's the crucial part to remember. Because of the concession freeze, when the San Julian mine goes dark, there is no new San Julian 2 being built to take its place. There's no next project in the pipeline. Each closure is a permanent reduction in Mexico's output capacity. The dominoes are already falling. So you have the government squeezing the industry from the top down, killing its future. That alone would be a massive crisis for the silver market. But it gets worse.
At the same time, there's another force squeezing from the bottom up, the deep and pervasive infiltration of the supply chain by organized crime, which is diverting and stealing the silver that is still being produced.
The primary mechanism for this is a form of extortion known as the vacuna, which translates to the vaccine. It's framed as a payment for protection. Cartels will approach a mining operation and demand a tax, often as high as 20% of the mine's gross output. And they don't always want cash. Often they demand payment in the physical ore itself. This is a parallel criminal tax system operating with impunity, and it's siphoning off a fifth of production before it can ever reach the legitimate market.
And what happens if a company refuses to pay? The consequences are swift and they are violent. We're talking about convoys of concentrate being hijacked, workers and executives being kidnapped for ransom, and critical equipment being destroyed. This isn't a business dispute, it's warfare. Look at the example of Pan American Silver's Dolores mine. This wasn't a small operation. It was a major mine that was forced to completely suspend operations. Why? Because the cartels made it impossible to safely move people and supplies. Just like that, 3 million ounces of annual silver production vanished.
To understand how systemic this is, look at this number. An estimated 30% of mining operations in Mexico's key silver-producing states are either directly controlled or systematically taxed by cartels. That means nearly a third of the industry is operating under the thumb of criminal organizations. A huge portion of Mexico's silver is effectively being stolen or produced under duress, and you can be sure that stolen silver disappears into black markets, never to be seen in the official supply data.
So we have this perfect storm brewing within Mexico, a government strangling the future and cartels stealing the present. But why should this matter to you or to an investor in London or a manufacturer in Tokyo? Well, let's zoom out from Mexico and look at the fragile state of the global silver market, because what happens in Mexico does not stay in Mexico.
This chart explains everything. Mexico is not just another producer. It is the unchallenged number one, responsible for almost a quarter of every single ounce of silver mined on planet Earth. They produce more than China and Peru combined. When a supplier that controls 24% of a critical global commodity runs into serious trouble, it's not a local story. It's a global crisis in the making.
Now, here is the absolutely critical piece of context. The silver market was already in a deep structural deficit before this situation in Mexico began to escalate. Using 2024 data, the world physically consumed about 1.16 billion ounces of silver. But the world's mines only produced about 820 million ounces. That's a gap, a deficit of 340 million ounces. For years, the market has been papering over this deficit by draining above-ground inventories. The silver is sitting in vaults in London and New York. But those stockpiles are not infinite. And you need to understand, this isn't a one-time anomaly. This is a chronic condition. 2025 is on track to be the fifth year in a row that demand has massively outstripped new mine supply. The system was already flashing red. The issues in Mexico are like pouring gasoline on that fire. That 340 million ounce deficit, it's about to get much, much bigger, very quickly.
And while all this is happening on the supply side, what's happening with demand? It's not just holding steady, it is exploding. Silver is not just a monetary metal, it is arguably the most critical strategic industrial metal of the 21st century. The entire green energy transition runs on silver. Every solar panel, every electric vehicle needs it. The rollout of 5G, the construction of massive AI data centers, even advanced military hardware, they are all massive consumers of physical silver. This isn't optional speculative demand. It is relentless, physical, industrial demand that is baked into the future of our global economy.
So let's take one final step back to see the forest for the trees. What is happening in Mexico, with both the government and the cartels asserting control, isn't happening in a vacuum. It's part of a much larger global trend known as resource nationalism. The age of Western nations having easy, cheap, and guaranteed access to the strategic commodities located in other countries, that era is rapidly coming to a close. Nations are waking up to the power they hold, and they are starting to use it.
And this brings us to the fundamental conflict, the core tension that will define the silver market for the next decade. On one side of the scale, you have supply that is under siege. It's being choked by governments, stolen by criminals, and hampered by years of underinvestment in new exploration. On the other side of the scale, you have demand that is structurally and non-negotiably rising, driven by the most important technological and industrial trends of our time. These two powerful forces are on an inevitable collision course.
And so we end with the question that this entire situation forces us to confront. We are watching in real time as the world's most important supplier of a critical metal is systematically taking itself offline, whether by official policy or criminal chaos. At the exact same moment, global demand for that metal is set to increase dramatically. So what happens next? What happens when an unstoppable force of demand meets an object that is rapidly shrinking? That is the question that everyone, from industrial planners to individual investors, needs to be asking themselves right now. Thank you for joining us on Bullion Signal. If you found this analysis valuable, please make sure you're subscribed to our channel so you don't miss our future deep dives into the forces shaping our financial world. Like and share this with anyone who needs to understand what's truly happening in the precious metals market. And finally, a brief disclaimer. The content presented here is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not and should not be construed as financial or investment advice. You should always conduct your own thorough research and consult with a professional financial advisor before making any investment decisions. You and you alone are responsible for the choices you make.